If you had the wisdom you have now back then, how many championships you feel like you guys could have won?
7.
7?
Cole said at least 10 when we asked him. He said at least 10.
Yeah, it said 7 and 10.
If it wasn't for the Spurs.
Yeah. No, that's true.
What Cole said.
No, that's true.
Kobe and Shaq are one of the greatest duos of all time.
Shaq's got 21. He's giving the birthday. End of the Kobe. Shaq gets the assist.
I would personally argue they are the greatest duo of all time.
Portland has 3 timeouts left. The Lakers have 2. Bryant to Shaq.
Together, these two would three-peat as champions from 2000 to 2002, putting the Lakers back on the map for the first time since the Showtime Lakers.
Los Angeles Lakers have made it 3 straight NBA championships.
However, as most of you know, throughout all of this success, there was quite a bit of drama behind the scenes. Kobe wanted to win a title on his own, and he had little respect for Shaq's work ethic, which was something that he held in high regard. And while initially they managed to find historic levels of success despite this well-documented beef, the problems off of the court eventually leaked into the actual basketball, resulting in the Lakers losing in round 2 to the San Antonio Spurs in 2003, and getting humiliated in the finals in 2004.
The Detroit Pistons have just shocked the Los Angeles Lakers. 100-87 to win the NBA title.
Immediately following this embarrassment, with tensions at their highest, the Lakers had to choose between Kobe and Shaq. And while Shaq had been their best player for 3 titles, it looked as though his best days might be behind him, whereas Kobe was just now entering his prime. So in the summer of '04, Shaq would be shipped off to Miami and Kobe stayed home in Los Angeles. After just 6 years in the Lakers starting lineup together where they would win 3 consecutive rings, the all-time great duo would go on to win 3 of the next 6 NBA championships separately. This combination of the monumental success they had as teammates, the limited time spent together, and the successes each player had individually following their split made this one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history. So, what if Kobe and Shaq had stayed together? That is what I want to explore in today's video, because I don't think the answer is as pretty as many think. Before we get into today's video, I want to talk about our sponsor, Bear. Bear is the best mattress company out there, and luckily for you, they have a ton of excellent end-of-year sales going on right now. The way Bear works is simple. They provide you with a sleep quiz that makes picking your mattress super easy. Everyone has their own preferences when it comes to sleep. For me personally, I am a side sleeper, and I prefer my bed to be more on the soft side than the firm side. So I simply just put all that information into the quiz and was paired with a perfect mattress for my needs. For my preferences, I was paired with an Elite Hybrid, and of course there are plenty of other options for your preferences. And from there, it was quickly shipped to my place for free. Since getting this mattress, it's been genuinely hard to get out of bed because it's just so excellent and tailor-made to my needs. Going from what I was sleeping on before this, which was a 13-year-old mattress, no pun intended, but it has been night and day for me. It's dramatically improved the quality of my sleep, and as a result, dramatically improved the quality of my life. And luckily, setting it up was super simple. It's a heavy box naturally, so I'd recommend having another person with you to set everything up, but you just take it out of the box, carefully cut away the plastic, and watch it inflate. Within minutes, you have a full mattress ready to go. Now I'm quite confident that you are going to love your Bear mattress, and Bear shares that same confidence. That is why they offer a free 120-night sleep trial. So you get over 3 months to make sure that you love it, and if you don't, you can return it for no charge. Bear also provides a lifetime warranty, and they even offer financing options and flexible payment plans. I love my Bear mattress, and I think you would too. If you are looking to improve your sleep, go to bearmattress.com/rusty for 35% off of your Bear mattress for a limited time during their extended cyber sale. Thank you to Bear for sponsoring this video. So to lay the groundwork, I'm going to do a brief history of both of these players following Shaq's departure from LA. Given that we're exploring what could have happened in these years of NBA history, we first must understand what actually did happen. So, first things first, LA trading Shaq means getting back some players in return. The most noteworthy among them were Caron Butler and Lamar Odom. While Caron would leave the Lakers after just one season, Lamar would be there to stay for quite a while, and he'd play a pivotal role on 2 championship Lakers teams down the road. Lamar was a big, versatile point forward who could dribble and pass insanely well for a player who was nearly 7 feet tall. He was also an excellent finisher, rebounder, and a solid defensive player. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. This trade also, of course, means that Shaq is heading off to Miami, where he'd play alongside yet another promising young guard. This time it would be Dwayne Wade, and be led by the legendary Pat Riley, Heat team president and former head coach of the Showtime Lakers. Speaking of legendary coaches, Phil Jackson was out in LA. He would retire and would be followed up by Rudy Tomjanovich, who is most known for getting his face caved in by Kermit Washington. That play is actually a solid visual metaphor for how his tenure in Los Angeles would go. After an underwhelming 24-19 record to start the 04-05 season, Rudy would resign as head coach, citing exhaustion as the reason, and was replaced by his assistant, who was even worse at his job. Despite Kobe being second in the league in scoring, averaging over 27 points per game, the Lakers went just 10-29 for the rest of the year, finishing with a dismal 34-48 record. But the silver lining was that they would get the 10th pick in the 2005 draft, and use it to fill the Shaq-sized hole in their starting lineup by selecting a teenage big man named Andrew Bynum. Meanwhile, Shaq in Miami was the runner-up for MVP, narrowly losing the award to a scrawny little white guy in Phoenix. While his numbers may not impress as much as they do in other years, Shaq's presence gave Miami an extra 17 wins this season, tying them for the second best record in the NBA. Now, a huge sophomore season breakout from Dwayne Wade definitely helped him along the way. In fact, I really think this was a pretty weak season as far as MVP candidates go. Not a super impressive campaign, but there were also not that many good candidates. Either way, this proves that after the breakup, Shaq still had one more year of MVP candidate level production left in him. But with his age and injuries increasing, we are going to be keeping an eye on how much Big Diesel has left in the tank. However, Shaq did win at least one thing this year, that being the Christmas Day game where he and Kobe faced off for the first time, which was the most watched regular season NBA game in 6 years, more than any game that they actually played together. The following season, both players had much better outcomes than in the year prior. Phil Jackson came out of retirement to resume being the head coach of the Lakers, and Kobe averaged a casual 35 points per game, doing this in the process.
And an 81-point game.
However, despite this insane individual dominance, the Lakers would only win 45 games, and they would lose in round 1 of the 2006 playoffs, blowing a 3-1 lead to that scrawny little white guy in Phoenix. Meanwhile, how are things going for Shaq? Well,
Let's go! Rebound Wade! The Miami Heat, they've done it! They win their first championship in franchise history!
Shaq won his 4th championship, but it was his first one as the second option, as in the finals he averaged a measly 13 points per game. He was still good enough to be the second guy, but that was it. He was helped by an all-time great finals performance by Dwayne Wade, on top of having Pat Riley back coaching. Naturally, Shaq winning this title pissed Kobe off a lot. So the following year, Kobe dominated, leading the league in scoring again, but still failing to make a dent in the standings, winning just 42 games, his 3rd year in a row with 45 or fewer wins. Meanwhile, the 06-07 season was fairly depressing for Shaq as well, who averaged below 20 points per game for the first time in his career and missed over half of the season with injuries. At this point, there were 6 centers averaging more points and 13 averaging more rebounds. Dude was putting up prime Eddie Curry numbers. And to put into perspective just how much Shaq's production had actually fallen off, just by his 3rd season outside of LA, he was being outproduced by Lamar Odom. Odom averaged just 1.4 less points while averaging 2.4 more rebounds and 2.8 more assists. As a result of this drop-off, the Heat were swept in round 1 by a young Bulls team. The next season, Kobe, thanks to adjusting his game a bit and Andrew Bynum breaking out in his 3rd year, had the Lakers on a 50-win pace. Unfortunately, Andrew would get hurt, but his production was more than made up for by the mid-season addition of Pau Gasol, an all-star big man with no real weaknesses in his game. This allowed the Lakers to become contenders again for the first time since the divorce of Shaq and Kobe, and they would make it all the way to the NBA Finals, where they would lose to the Big Three Boston Celtics in 6 games. On this run, Lamar Odom averaged 14, 10, and 3 assists, being 3rd in both scoring and minutes for LA. Now, where was Shaq during all of this? Well, getting traded again. He had declined super hard after that championship season for the Heat, averaging just 14 points per game this year prior to being moved. The Heat would trade Shaq for Sean Marion, aka The Matrix. His nickname isn't necessarily all that important, but it's fucking sick. So this move would pair the aging Shaq with that scrawny little white guy in Phoenix, and the Suns would almost immediately regret it. Fitting Shaq into the Suns' 7 seconds or less offense did nothing but eliminate their fast pace of play, which was something they were kind of known for. That season, the Suns would finish with a 55-win record in the regular season, but win just 1 game in their first round matchup versus San Antonio. They were significantly worse in the following season, with Shaq winning just 46 games in 08-09 and missing the playoffs, but Shaq did manage to have his best season in a while individually, averaging 18 points per game. He even made an all-star team, however, this was really just a result of some home cooking as Phoenix was hosting the 2009 All-Star Game. Shaq would have a really good final All-Star appearance though, and he and Kobe would actually share the MVP award for the game, which is cute, I guess. But that said, I don't really feel like this was all that legitimate of an all-star appearance, more so inflated numbers in a losing situation. Plus, he had the benefit of the game being in his team city. Now, as for Kobe, well, what did he get done this year?
As the buzzer sounds, it's official. The Lakers are NBA champions once again. LA wins the 2009 NBA title.
How about the following season?
Throws it ahead. The Lakers repeat back-to-back titles. The LA Lakers, the 2010 NBA champions.
Between both of these title runs, Andrew Bynum and Lamar Odom, 2 players they would not have added without trading Shaq, averaged 18.6 points, 12.8 rebounds, and 3.2 stocks in the 2009 playoffs, and in 2010 they averaged a combined 18.3 points, 15.5 rebounds, and 3.5 stocks. Meanwhile, Shaq's Suns missed the playoffs in 2009, and he would join LeBron's Cavaliers and the Big Three Boston Celtics in the following 2 seasons, attempting to ring chase in his final years where he was quite washed, routinely missing chunks of the season while putting up JaVale McGee numbers. So, over a 12-season stretch, Kobe and Shaq won a near majority of the overall rings, half as a duo and half broken up. Shaquille O'Neal would retire in 2011, and for now, that's where our history lesson ends. Okay, now we're actually going to run this scenario, and something important to establish up top is that I'm going to be looking at this what if through 2 perspectives. I'm going to look at this hyper-realistically, trying to truthfully identify what these 2 could have done if they stayed together, doing so through a critical lens. And then I'm going to be more loose with my perspective, being more charitable, I guess. So basically, you're going to be getting a critical dickhead perspective and a not so critical dickhead perspective. You good with that? I hope so, because we're diving right in. 2005, Shaq is in LA yet again. The Lakers are a top seed in the Western Conference, which means they do not land the 10th pick to draft Andrew Bynum. And they obviously have no Lamar Odom, as he is on the Miami Heat for the long haul. We're also going to assume that Phil Jackson as well as Derek Fisher remain with the Lakers instead of going on some brief detours. This is obviously a big boost for the Lakers as well. Now, remember, this is 2005, so Shaq still has MVP candidate level production left within him, and Kobe is at his absolute peak right now. So I'd say they have a decent chance at winning it all. However, you have to consider the field they're playing against. One thing that is super undermentioned when discussing this scenario is how the Western Conference in the 2000s is pretty much the toughest conference in NBA history. Making it through the playoffs out there required something as ridiculous as a Kobe and Shaq type of duo. And even they struggled to win the West after 2001. Sure, they made it 2 out of the next 3 times, but even in those 2 times, it was a serious struggle. The one time they didn't make it to the finals was at the hands of Tim Duncan, who was on the greatest carry job run in NBA history at that time, pretty much single-handedly taking care of the Lakers in round 2, and unfortunately for this hypothetical 2005 Lakers squad, they're going to be running into the Spurs again. But this time, Timmy has friends. Manu Ginobili has broken out as an all-star, and Tony Parker had all-star level production as well. In the postseason, the two would combine to average 38 points, 8.5 assists, and 8.5 rebounds. A stark contrast to what they put up in 2003, when the Spurs lost just 4 games on their way through the Western Conference. So, me personally, I'm taking the Spurs over this Lakers team. If Duncan beat them alone before, having quite a bit more help is definitely going to get the job done. And even if the Lakers managed to win that series, they would still have to face the Detroit Pistons in the NBA Finals, a Pistons team that pushed this Spurs team to 7. So again, I'm just not really feeling LA on this one. So that's me being hypercritical and realistic. What about the charitable side? Well, I guess these matchups are so close that I'll say screw it, let them win this year. So I'll give you 1 title on the optimistic side, 0 on the realistic side. 2006. This is a much better year for LA to contend. While Shaq was a step slower, he was still good enough for playoff averages of 18 and 10, and Kobe went thermonuclear this year. So I'd argue there's enough here to go on a run, especially considering Shaq went on this run with a young Wade who is worse than Kobe at this point. I'd say this is the year. The Spurs were not as impressive these playoffs, and I don't really fear the Dallas Mavericks all that much, so I think they win the West, and of course, they won't be running into the Miami Heat, so I imagine they win the finals as well. And this goes for my optimistic and realistic perspective. There's a title there either way, bringing the running total to 1, maybe 2 more chips for the hypothetical Shaq and Kobe. 2007. All right, this is where things start to get rough, and we can start to do a little bit of speed running. The 2007 Spurs are even more refined and even better than the 2005 squad I said would beat them before. And I just think there's no way Kobe beats this team with Shaq averaging a measly 17 and 7. As previously mentioned, in the same year for the Lakers, Lamar Odom averaged 16, 10, and 5. So Shaq is really just replacing the production of the player that he was traded for. And the Lakers lost 4-1 to the Suns this year in real life, despite Kobe being Kobe and getting that big production from Lamar Odom. So I'm saying no to a 2007 title on both sides. 2008. Things are not getting any better. Even if this duo somehow did manage to make the finals, Shaq is only averaging 14 points per game at this point. Now this is where this what if gets kind of weird. Do you still trade for Pau Gasol as Shaq becomes a background role player? Because it's not like they gave up what was perceived as much for him at the time in reality. Or does this kind of break the what if? When Shaq says he wins 7 titles with Kobe, is he hiding that a part of his fantasy is playing with Pau Gasol? I'm going to go ahead and say no Pau trade here, which is a bummer because I'd have no issue saying Pau is better than Shaq at this point, which is kind of the problem, so not having him certainly hurts their chances. Given that the Lakers lost this final series to the Celtics with Pau and Odom's better production, I don't think that changes here with Shaq, even being optimistic. 2009. So this is the first time the Lakers won a title after the Kobe-Shaq breakup in real life, but you have to actually consider what this roster would look like at this point. There is no Pau, there is no Odom, and there is no Bynum. These 3 combined in the 2009 postseason averaged 37 points, 23.6 rebounds, and 6 stocks. Now, what did Shaq put up in his 2009 playoff run? Well, nothing, considering he missed the playoffs, but he averaged 15-9 in 5 games versus the Spurs last year. But even presuming he averages that the whole playoffs, that's still way behind the level of production of those 3 players, which, as a result of his presence, are no longer in Lakers uniforms. So I don't think they make it out of the West in 2009. I think the Houston Rockets and Denver Nuggets would beat them in a series. And finally, we arrive to 2010. Game 7 of the 2010 NBA Finals was decided by 4 points. This hypothetical Lakers roster is considerably worse than that real one, so there's no way they win a title this year. Just to look at our tally, that's 2 championships if I am being optimistic, and 1 if I'm being completely honest. That's quite a bit off from 4. And if you use your imagination, I'm sure you might find yourself asking different questions about this scenario. What if we got some version of it where Shaq properly hands the torch off to Kobe? Or what if Shaq got into shape, dodged some injuries, and extends his prime another year or 2 for some reason? Or what if Shaq did get hurt as a Laker and they ended up with a lottery pick anyways? What if they did end up doing that Pau trade? What if they had some other trade up their sleeve? But the thing about that is, there's an endless well of possibilities, and it might just be irresponsible of me to spend that much time on each and every one of them. So yeah, that's the scenario. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Drop a like, subscribe, and don't look at how much time is left in the video. So 1, maybe 2 extra championships. Something about that just feels so unsatisfying, right? Like, damn, we don't get the storybook alternative of Kobe and Shaq winning 4 extra titles, or even just them winning the 3 they originally did. Ain't that unfortunate? Now, maybe you don't care about this specific what if all too much. I mean, you did make it to this point in the video, so you probably care at least a little bit. But just for you, let's say that I have sat here and just shit all over some what if that you do care about. How would that make you feel? When people imagine these types of things, they love to romanticize the idea. You know, Kobe and Shaq didn't maybe have more in the tank. In reality, they could have won 1 billion championships. But why is that? Why do we even ponder these types of things in the first place? What exactly is to be gained from pondering a scenario, and why would you get so impassioned about what would happen hypothetically? I've discussed and gone through what ifs plenty of times over, and the thing that always throws me off when going through these silly little scenarios is the response you get from people, both fans and players alike. It seems as though everyone has their own idea of the way that things should be, and they keep that separate from the way things are. Their headcanon. For those who don't know, Headcanon is essentially a fan's idea of a piece of content that isn't actually there, just their own personal idea of a part of the story. This is obviously most often applied to different types of fictional media, but it's also an appropriate descriptor for what's happening in these hypotheticals. People have their own headcanons about these what-ifs. Maybe you're a Lakers fan and Kobe and Shaq staying together means that they win 10 NBA championships. That's your headcanon. And of course, for Shaq, his headcanon is that they can win 7. Why any one of us arrives to any particular headcanon is entirely up to the given person and their circumstances. You know, Shaq has a very different reason for speculating on what could have been than I do. But whether the story is about you or you're just an outsider looking in, when speculating on these types of ideas, we all have a unique set of biases that will vary from person to person, and these ultimately shape our perspective. This is unavoidable. There is no such thing as a truly unbiased perspective. Especially in this sort of context where the primary variable is imagination. Why is this often something that we hold so close to our hearts? In the case of someone like Shaq, it makes perfect sense. We all have regrets and things that we wish could be different. Not many of us have regrets involving winning NBA championships, but you know, the point stands. That same passion and closeness, while not on a personal level, can be applicable to a sports fan. Lord knows I like to speculate on what could have been for the Chicago Bulls in a variety of instances. What if the ref blew the whistle on the excessive timeout from David Blatt in 2015? What if Derrick Rose did not tear his ACL? What if Kobe was traded to the Bulls in 2007? What if the stupid bastards in the Bulls front office traded Luol Deng for the 10th pick so that they would have the cap space to sign LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh in 2010? What if they hadn't spent the last 7 seasons building around a fucking shooting guard? You know, these things tend to haunt us, if you didn't pick up on that. But however we may interpret them, one thing is almost always the case. These perspectives skew remarkably positive in terms of their outcome. We really romanticize the idea of if, and I think our tendency to do that is really indicative of our unwillingness to participate in and appreciate reality itself. If our imagination is more pleasant than reality, then why wouldn't we indulge? The positivity of our imagination and creativity is a feature of the human condition, meant to balance the negativity bias built into our survival mechanisms. These what-ifs are a better version of reality that we can escape into and briefly fantasize our way out of the actual reality we live in. How many Bulls fans are out there daydreaming about a healthy Derrick Rose even to this day? How often do you think Shaq daydreams about hoisting up his 7th NBA championship alongside Kobe? And how often do you remember a scenario from your own life and imagine, what if I said this, or what if I did that? It's only natural. It's completely normal to desire exploring these ideas, and especially to project so positively. It wouldn't be so common if it wasn't normal. But unfortunately, eventually, we have to face reality. Hypotheticals are just that. Hypothetical. And when we blur the lines between our imagination and our real-life understanding of the past, we become vulnerable to When Shaq or I expound on whether or not Kobe and Shaq would have had better careers had they not split up, we're both doing the same type of thing, exercising our egos to propagate our beliefs about what could have been. We're both in similar roles in mass communication in the same niche, arguing different opposing ideas, sure, but ultimately in a similar forum. What I'm saying is, Shaq and I are basically the same guy. Sure, he might say that 7 titles is reasonable, and I can say that it's not, and we can go back and forth on that all day long, as I'm sure many of you intend to in the comments below. But what Shaq and I have to gain from our arguments are pretty dramatically different things. Shaq has his own legacy to elevate. The higher Shaq's status is in this community, the higher he can climb social ladders, gain notoriety, and continue to establish his case as one of the greatest to ever do what he did. He's propping up his own image in a way. Shaq's status as an NBA legend gives him the platform to say whatever he wants on a variety of subjects, including his own career and legacy. That's the power that he has. And when he says that he could have won 7 with Kobe, he is using that power to legitimize his perspective, as clearly biased as it may be. While sure, an NBA nerd like me might be able to see through it and at least attempt to call it out, the average person listening to Shaq say this or anything else is likely not a die-hard fan. Most people are casuals, or the friends or family of those casuals. These people are impressionable, and their ideas hold weight in the collective consciousness of the community. And hearing him say this, many will unquestionably regurgitate the same take and borrow it for their own headcanons, cementing it as a near truth in their minds. And when Shaq uses his platform to give people these ideas about how much greater he could have been, it's a type of propaganda. Now, when I say propaganda, there's obviously a bit of cheekiness to it. There are hundreds of things in society being propagandized that are far more important than NBA history, but it's still a form of it nonetheless. Stroking the egos of Lakers fans, letting them access an imaginary past where they experience even more joy from success, it does something to them. Getting a dose of nostalgia is a universal human experience, but mixing nostalgia with fiction and repackaging it for the masses has a past in human history connected to some of the most dangerous and harmful ideas we have ever stumbled across. When people aren't happy, like capital H, happy, they turn to whatever they can find to make life good enough, at least for the moment. For you, it might be this video. For others, maybe it's a book, a game, or Family Guy funny moments on the top of the screen and Subway Surfers on the bottom. Rather than addressing whatever it is that makes us so unsatisfied, whether it's wanting more money for bills or more NBA championships, more often, people will take the path of least resistance towards feeling alright. The true origins of any one person's suffering could be entirely internal, an inescapable ego, trauma, or mental health in general. Or it can be external, the need to survive, to be a part of something, to connect with other people. And often it's a lot of both, but in terms of what we can control, rather than searching for more permanent solutions, coping is often much easier. So we escape reality into these things that pacify us. We become so distracted with what we use to cope that we forget about what we're coping about in the first place. And I mean, sometimes that's the point, and that's okay. But suffering people are vulnerable to charismatic figures who try to sell them on ideas that make them feel less suffering and less vulnerable. And passing off a fictionalized past as a story that has even some elements of truth to it is a weapon that some of the most villainous human beings of all time have used to galvanize masses of people to do some of the most evil things in history. Tethering your identity to a romanticized make-believe idea of your past is a bad life strategy for most people, but it sure can be easy and make you feel better about yourself, especially when the make-believe idea blames some other group for the entirety of your suffering. No, Shaq is not rallying his troops for some hate movement, it's not that deep. But this fetishization of escapism and nostalgia through what-ifs has enough similarities where it serves as a low-stakes example of the dangers of propaganda. Responsible production is something that has fewer obstacles when operating on the level that we do here. It's just me and Rudy and some occasional help from our friends. There's no authority telling us things we should or should not say, or making sure that we paint the NBA in an explicitly positive light or meet any other agenda. But Shaq does have those obstacles. Mainstream media all have that obstacle of their authorities, making sure that these escapes stay escapes and don't rock the boat too much. But responsible consumption is something that any individual can try and take part of. Yes, I know, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, blah, blah, blah. But that's no excuse for being mindless in your consumption. It's okay to do a what if here or there. It's okay that you clicked on this video and stuck around this long, but if we overindulge on entertainment, if we obsess a little too much about things like what ifs instead of what is, then we're weakening a part of our own humanity by detaching ourselves from what is real. Knowing your roots, understanding your place in history, these sorts of ideas do immeasurably more to make us feel present, to remember what we're coping for, and to learn what we can do to help it, than creating a mythic past for our headcanon ever will. Finding the hidden assumptions of different perspectives, critically engaging in both the text and subtext of whatever it is you're consuming, and overall finding good ideas and holding on to them with an open mind, these aren't just ways to enrich yourself, but also to keep you and everyone else safe from becoming part of a problem too big for any one of us to solve alone. Life can be very hard, so sometimes it's good to get away. But escapism must be in moderation, otherwise we risk losing our humanity. Detached from the truth and what's real, vulnerable to being a part of an evil machine, and probably miserable because of it. That's why things like protests in sports make sense, because you are not entitled to a total escape. Listen, using sports as a type of escape is understandable. An escape into the sports world can remind you of what it's like to be connected to a community or to have something to root for. But Colin Kaepernick doesn't live in Madden. LeBron doesn't live in 2K, and neither do you. You can't expect other people to exist in a vacuum just to keep you as comfortable as possible, not even multimillionaire athletes. If you choose to disengage with reality, you not only risk becoming an insufferable jerk, but you also become part of the problem that's getting in the way of your escape in the first place. So the onus is on you to grow the fuck up and accept that. Everyone has to face reality, because if we collectively realize a problem, we tend to try and solve it. At least those of us who don't bury our heads in the sand. We all have a duty to remain connected to the world around us, and sports are a part of that world, not some perfect escape. It's also why what ifs have the potential to be toxic, because they often do nothing to moderate the extremes of what we are most vulnerable to when we're not satisfied. And the conditions of our world produce a lot of people who are not satisfied. And this results in us daydreaming an alternate reality that you end up bitter you are not living in. There's plenty of reasons to want to embrace escapism. It's a very warm and comforting blanket, no doubt. But if you give in to these temptations to the point that you fail to see reality, you can become a tool for some pretty evil things. So what was the point of all this? How did we go from Kobe and Shaq to fascism? Well, part of it is that I'm insane. But really it's as simple as this. I'm a huge Kobe fan, as you can tell from this big ass canvas on my wall. And the story of his career is one of my favorite in NBA history. When I see people present the idea that Kobe and Shaq's breakup was a bad thing, I just can't help but strongly disagree because of this. Not only do I obviously think them staying together wouldn't go all that well, at least by contrast to what Shaq seems to think, but more important than that, I like this version of history. I don't need any correction for it. Kobe Bryant triumphing and winning a title without Shaq, proving he can win without him, is one of my favorite moments in NBA history. And the 2006 Miami Heat are one of my favorite NBA teams of all time, primarily because I'm a Dwayne Wade and Pat Riley stan, but still. The sentiment of disappointment that you tend to get when discussing what ifs is something that has always bothered me. Now don't get me wrong, if it's a what if of like, what if some player's career was not ruined by injuries, you know, you're allowed to be disappointed with that, especially if the injury is, you know, death. But with something like this what if, I can't help but feel like it is somewhat dismissive of the reality in front of us, a reality that I am quite fond of. So that's what makes this what if specifically personal to me. But another thing that's personal to me and should be personal to everybody is staying connected to the world around us, as hard as that may be. A lot of very, very awful things have happened and will continue to happen because people get lost in escapism to cope with their reality. Rather than being galvanized for positive change, they are pacified or worse. But the only way to change that negative reality is to be present in it and work to make it better. Don't live your life in your head. Don't spend your days constantly wondering what could have been. It's not the way you want to live, and it's definitely not what's best for the rest of us. Basically, what I'm getting at is that if you think Kobe and Shaq should have stayed together, you're a fascist. That's a joke, in case you couldn't tell, by the way. But yeah, that's it. I didn't know how to end the video. So drop a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you are new, leave a comment down below to let me know what you think of this video. The next one is going to be me being a hater for an hour, so I hope you can handle that. Bye.